was a little difficult. Alrighty, just to follow up some queries for those people who are out there watching us. We did have quite a few questions come in during that session, and we also had some come in during the break. So we will get back to you on those questions. What we will do is we will accumulate all the questions that we get from the floor and also from the streaming. If they're not answered in the notes that we have already prepared, we will write a Q&A fact sheet as well. So we will be in contact with you and answering those questions. But one of the questions I will follow up on that did come through from someone out in the wide world was asking about tidying up your payroll and how to delete terminated employees and things like that. If you go to the Attaché website, My Attaché, and you sign in, there will be I think, I'll make sure it's still there. On the right-hand side, there was a page that we set up for the end of financial year that is just finished. And in there is a payroll end-of-year guide. In the back pages of that, it takes you through deleting terminated employees, because when you try to delete a terminated employee, you might get a message saying that there are super payment summary details there. So it will tell you how to deal with those. If you might get a message that there is leave liability exists and things like that. So there is a list of the list of the messages that you might get and the suggested actions that you need to take. But as I said, in the back of the book for payroll end of year, there are guides to removing those. Alrighty, so now what are we doing? We're doing payroll reconciliation and management reporting. Alrighty, so as payroll people, no doubt you have to provide reports to management, and also making sure that your payroll reconciles with your general ledger, and it also equals your tax is correct and things like that. So when we ran our sessions at end of year, what I was surprised about when I took people through the reconciliation process, making sure that the figures that we're about to print on employees' payment summaries, what I realised was that no one's reconciling their payroll as they go throughout the year. They leave it until it's time to print their payment summaries, and then they check to see if everything's A-OK. So what I'm going to do is take you through reconciliation, setting up expense accounts, liability accounts, and as I mentioned earlier, it does not matter if you don't have the Attaché payroll, Attaché general ledger. You can still put all your general ledger information into the payroll and get debits and credit reports and costing reports and things like that. The other thing is, if you spend the time to set all of this up, then you shouldn't have to be printing our reports, dumping them into Excel and manually doing figures, okay? And I'll also show you a little trick. If you still like Excel, how easy it is to set Excel up to read payroll instead of dumping reports into Excel. Alrighty, so let's go way back to the beginning of how this is all set up. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about cost centres. And the cost centres in our payroll is under our company tab. And the reason why it's under our cost centres is under our company tab, because our cost centres go right across our accounting system as well. Okay, so if management want to know what each of your departments is costing you, instead of having one big payroll, each fortnight my payroll costs the company $100,000, and then the boss comes and says to you, well, how much do the sales people cost me? How much do the admin people cost me? Well, you can set up cost centres to do that for you. So again, what you need to do is, when you are setting up these cost centres, you need to think of your coding. So you'll see there on my screen, I've set up one called Admin 01 and Admin 02. Now, that might represent that Admin 01 is for my North Sydney branch, Admin 02 could be for my Parramatta branch. So when I do my costing reports there, I can get a costing report for each section, each branch, but then I can also get total admin for the whole company. So I can see how much admin at Parramatta costs me, how much admin at North Sydney costs me, but then I can see how much total admin people cost me as well. The other thing that you can do as well is, with an employee costs your company more than just their wages. You have to pay workers' comp, you have to pay all these different overheads when it comes to your employees. So what you can do is you can add an on-cost, and it will appear in a separate column on all of the costing reports that you print out of payroll. Here we have our default general ledger account codes. So for all the expense for your income, so I've just put in an account code 12345. So every time I attach an employee to cost centre admin, it will create a transaction to my GL account code 12345. Okay? I will have it set to consolidate, because when we transfer this to the attaché general ledger, you don't want to see a line for every employee. You just want one total for the fortnight. So the expense for allowances. In your chart of accounts, do you have a different expense for allowances, or is it just grouped in the same wages expense account? So I don't have a different expense for allowances, it all just goes into the one wages expense. This is my liability for deductions, so 2346 is my account code. So that means that if you are setting up deductions in your payroll, and you need to, and you will have a liability account for those deductions. This is my expense for my for employer contributions, and of course my liability for contributions as well. So all employees, every time I attach an employee to that cost centre, it will pick up these general ledger codes every time I process a pay. So if you have different general ledger codes for different cost centres, you can just key them here. Okay, and that just means that every time you process a pay, it will give you those different cost centres, different debits and credits for the cost centre. The other option that you've got here as well is in regards to leave liability accounts. Now this is unique to BI, this leave liability and cost centres, okay? So this bit that I'm talking about here is only in attaché BI. When it comes to your leave liability, if you are running cost centres in our payroll, if you have different leave provision expense accounts for each cost centre, you can put them into here, and you have maybe you have a different provision account for each cost centre as well, so you can put them into here. So when I run the leave liability journal report, which you'll see in a moment, it will pick up these expense accounts for each cost centre for my leave liability. So if you currently print the leave liability report and you do manual splitting, we can split it as you go. Okay, so we have that information there. Okay. So that's where you set up your cost centres and all the relevant GL codes that relate to each cost centre. On each of your income types, allowances, I'll do it on income types. Oops. When I set up my income type codes, you'll see that I have an option here to select multiple GL dissections, and that means that if I'm not using splitting, then I will have one expense account, and that's where you will put the expense account. Okay? If you're not splitting over multiple cost centres, you will just put one expense account into there. Here is where you can attach the cost centres to the relevant income types. And so I can do that, and I can attach that one to there. So as I mentioned, every time you process a pay, then it will generate debit and credit reports. So for example, oops, wrong spot. You'll see there that it's picked up my account codes. These are different account codes, but that's all right. So you'll see there account code 21100. It's made a debit transaction. There are my relevant cost centres that are attached as well. You'll also see if a transaction has been coded and it hasn't been attached to a cost centre. If I don't put in any GL codes into my payroll, you'll see that the word will appear instead of the actual GL code. For those of you who don't use the Attaché General Ledger, if you just turn on General Ledger in your payroll options and you can't be bothered to go through and put lots of GL codes in, this debit and credit report will still be generated for you, but it will just have the words of the actual pay element. So you'll see when I printed that report, I printed it with consolidation. If I print it as unconsolidated, what you see is more detail, and it does give you the description. So this is annual leave, and there's my debit transaction for those employees. My normal hours, my debit transaction, my super guarantee, 46300, I know to be my bank account, so there's all the credit transactions going to my bank account. Union fees, my super guarantee, there's all my tax. So you can get a detailed debit and credit report, but so all you need to do is to make sure that you turn on General Ledger in your options, and then you can get this debit and a credit report. And of course, if you're using the Attaché General Ledger, you can just transfer that across. So what I would do for those of you who do use the Attaché General Ledger, what I normally do is I will send this report to PDF. I would log in to the Attaché General Ledger, and you post from payroll to the General Ledger. It will create a batch, and then you save this as payroll GL batch 46 and the date. So then that becomes your audit trail. So that will reflect what is in your General Ledger. Okay, so you will always have those audit trails. So if you spend the time to go through our payroll, putting in all your General Ledger codes, setting up all your cost centres, all your financial management reporting should be splitting at the time of processing the pays. No one should have to do big payroll reports and sit there and split it all. It should all be splitting as you go. Okay. Now, when it comes to your leave liability, leave liability. Of course, I can imagine that everyone is printing this leave liability report. Is that true? Everyone uses this report. And of course, this report will show you the employees, all the different leave types. It will also show you the hours, the entitlement, plus the dollar value. And then, of course, you give this to whoever does the journal to work out your leave liability journal. But I would say now, for the last 7 or 8 years in our payroll, we have this report. Now, this has been in the payroll for 8 years in our payroll. This creates a leave liability journal. So again, whether you use our general ledger or not, doesn't matter. So this will allow you to do a calculation date. So if you forgot to do this report for the month of September, I can type in September's date. I can add an on cost if I wish to. I can include leave loading, any contingent period of long service leave. I can tick this box and it will pick up the GL accounts that are attached to my cost centre, and I can do a report based on cost centres as well. So you just need to make sure that you tick the relevant leave types, the employment status, so make sure you do tick the terminated people, so it will reverse the liability because of the payout. If you saw where I put those GL codes, you can change them on the fly if you need to. Again, as I said, if you can't be bothered putting GL codes, it will just use the words like here, leave for provision and long service. So you'll see what it does. It actually creates the debit and the credit. So you see that my figures are fairly low because I've run this report. So it looks at the last time you run this report and today's date and works out the leave liability. So if you run it at the end of each month, it looks at the last time you ran the report and only does the leave liability for that month. Okay? And you can see that it creates your debit and your credit journal for you. And for those who are using our general ledger, you can post that directly into our GL. For those who aren't using our GL, of course, you can just email that off to the finance team for them to do a manual journal. Okay, so that makes life easier for you. The other option that you have when you run this report, if I tick this box, show employee details, then it prints a line for each employee. So again, you can get a detailed one or you can just get a summary one. So that leave liability journal might make it easier for you when it comes to doing your leave liability journals. Makes sense? You right? Yep. Okay, so is there any questions about any of that leave liability journals, those debits and the credits? The other reports, when it comes to costing reports, so we have this payroll costing report. So if you set up cost centres in the payroll, it will give you a split based on ordinary, overtime, sick, other terminations, any terminations that you do, any allowances, and of course, employer contributions. So these are the costing reports. You'll also see that any employees that aren't attached to a cost centre will appear as well. So you'll see here that when I set up my cost centre, so I have account admin 01, so that gives me a total for that cost centre. It gives me a total for this cost centre, but then it is giving me a total admin, adding the two admin cost centres together. So all of your management reports, as I said, if your management team want to see how much their wages are being used, it's the same thing if you were doing job costing, if you wanted to see, for us at Attaché, how much it all cost all the staff to work on this event. So we would have a cost centre set up for this event. Everything that we do in regards to this event is all costed to this event. So there's little things like that if you need to work out what your employees are doing and what they're actually working on. Forget what I was going to do. It's something to do with these costs. The other thing with the cost centres as well, in regards to your superannuation, when you set up your superannuation to calculate, you have these two options here, multiple GL dissections and disperse over cost centres. And what that means is if your employees work in different cost centres in the same pay period, their super will be automatically split across those cost centres based on the hours worked. So if they worked 20 hours in one cost centre and they worked 20 hours in another cost centre, the super would be automatically split across cost centres. Okay, so that means that on their timesheet they'll have one line for the admin, normal hours, 20 hours normal in cost centre admin. Second line would be 20 hours in times normal hours for cost centre production, and then of course it would split their superannuation across that automatically. So does it make sense to everybody? So again, it's all about getting the setups of your payroll correct. Then on payday, you should only have to key hours worked, nothing else. And then at the end of the pay cycle, when it comes to the reporting, you should be able to just print the reports that are required. Alrighty, so now what I wanted to talk to you about is what reports you print to make sure that your payroll is correct. Okay, so as I mentioned, at the end of the financial year, I take you through printing all of these reports, making sure your figures are correct, making sure that your tax is correct. And these reports, you should be doing at least quarterly. Okay, don't leave it until the end of financial year. So under period end payroll payment summaries, we have this tax reconciliation report. So if I just print this, I might just do it for one employee, so it's not so big. Alrighty, so this report tells you the gross earnings and the total tax for each employee. It also will show you allowances that the employee has earned that are itemised. So if you set up new allowances and you just want to make sure that they're all set up correctly after you've processed the pays, you can print this report. Other allowances, that's where the itemised ones will show. It'll also show RESC, so if employees are doing salary sacrifice into superannuation, the figure should be here as well. The total of this report, your total tax, of course, should equal what you have sent to the tax office. So as you send your monies off during the year, it should equal what you've sent to the tax office. And the total gross of this is what the employees have earned year to date. So that is the summary report. This details, payment summary details report, it will give you extra information about payment summaries. So if you have processed ETP payments, you can go and print this report and it will show you whether they are the right type. So whether they're a type O for unused RDOs, time in lieu, or whether they're a type R for redundancy. So the payment summary details report will give you extra information about the ETPs that you have processed. The payment summary report, when you print this report, remember to do it for a date range, otherwise you'll get all transactions since day one. And this report just gives you a little bit more information and itemises the employee's pays into different pay elements. So the PAYG tax report gives you lump sums. This one will break down the employee's pays into different pay elements. Okay. So those three reports you should be printing on a regular basis. And those reports, if they are correct right throughout the year, then of course, when it comes to the end of the financial year, you really should only have to put in your FBT figures and print your payment summaries. Okay? So please, if you can get into a habit of printing those reports throughout the year. When it comes to checking your payroll and of course your general ledger, you will have a payroll clearing account set up. In our payroll, you can set up a GL payroll clearing account. This is your general ledger bank account. Now, when you finish processing the pays and you create the bank file, there should be no monies in that clearing account at all. The only reason there should, if there is money, figures in the payroll clearing account after you have finished processing a pay, then that means that an employee is either being paid by cash or cheque, or you haven't set up their bank account details correctly and they weren't included in the bank file. So your payroll clearing account should always, if all of your employees get paid by bank transfer, and all those employees, when you finish processing the pays, that payroll clearing account should be zero. Okay. The other thing, when it comes to deductions in our payroll, some of you, of course, will set up deductions for child support, garnishes, things like that. And of course, they will go into a deductions clearing account. Then at the end of the month, you will look at that account and then you will transfer the funds to the relevant organisations and do a journal to fix up that clearing account. Is that the way most people are doing it? Alrighty. So when it does come to doing deductions, you can do it that way. So you can set up a deduction for child support, you can set up a deduction for garnishes. But the easiest way when it comes to deductions, after-tax deductions, is to actually set up an employee bank account. Do I have one? So you'll see here my friend Joe, I have set up a bank account for his child support. So what happens is that is the BSB and account number for the Reserve Bank. Here I put in the Centrelink reference number. I attach it to Joe, put in the amount, and all I do is put that on Joe's standard pay, and that money is transferred every payday. So I don't have to set up a deduction, take the money, and then go and do a second step to transfer the money to Canberra. So any after-tax deduction that your employees have, you can set up as an employee bank account, and the money is transferred straight away, rather than setting it up as a deduction, taking the money, and then having to transfer it in a separate process. Okay. The other reports that I wanted to talk to you about is superannuation. Okay, so we have reports, payroll, superannuation. So did everyone know that tab was even there? So the first superannuation report that we have for you here is a superannuation report that shows you the calculations of how it is being calculated. Maybe I shouldn't have done everyone. That's all right. So what it does, it is based on individual employees. It will show you each pay date. It will show you the hours worked, the percentage, how much they earned, the monthly threshold, and of course, the superannuation. So there you have it. So this report shows you how the super is being calculated. So if you feel as if you've just transferred all this money to the superannuation and you got queries about it, you can come back and print this report for any date range. So you'll see pay date range. So if you get queries back from super funds about why this dollar amount's this dollar amount, always use that superannuation report, and you can do it, print it based on the relevant pay date range, and it will show you how the super has been calculated. Of course, this one will show you the superannuation based on the splits on different cost centres. So you'll see the different cost centres. Maybe I should have printed that a little bit better. So it also gives you that dollar value as well. The next report, the Super Payment Summary Report, you can use this report when you print this report. The recommended print sequence will be superannuation fund. Again, you can choose the relevant pay date range. And what this report does, it gives you super, the name of the super fund, a subtotal for each employee, and then it also gives you a fund total. Okay, so that report will show you the different, give you totals based on each fund. Okay, so there's all those different reports. So for anyone who is still printing the old contributions report, employer contributions report, and the deductions report, this superannuation report here includes all super. So you'll see there salary sacrifice as well as super guarantee. So all super is on that one report. So you don't have to print employer contributions and the deductions report. Okay. You good? So is there any other reports that anyone wanted to see in particular? Okay, so what I'm going to do now is show you, this could be my highlight of my day, this could be. Okay, I know a lot of you in the room will be printing our payroll reports, and then what you do is you dump them into Excel and you move them around and all that sort of thing. So that, by dumping them into Excel, of course, it allows you to format them and put formulas in and things like that. But of course, every time you print a report and put it into Excel, it's just a copy of that report at that time in Excel. If you are the type of person, or your company is the type that uses Excel a lot and wants to do reporting, the idea is to set Excel up to read attaché data, to link Excel to the payroll data. So again, so don't be too fussy about trying to follow my steps. You will get notes about this. Okay, so the first to link Odbc to your attaché payroll data is we use what we call an Odbc driver. An Odbc driver just takes attaché data and you can view it in other systems. You can view it in Excel, you can view it in Access, you can do mail merges in Word. If you're clever, you can do email addresses into Outlook, but it's a bit messy. But it's about taking your data and using it in other systems or viewing it in other systems. So all we need to do is, with our Odbc driver, we just need to, I should put an icon on my desktop, it would have helped. All I need to do is to tell the Odbc driver where my attaché programs are and where my data is. So that's, with the attaché Odbc, all you do is tell it where the programs are and where the data is. Then you select all the files that you want to read, and these are all my payroll files. Now the thing is, when you're writing customer reports or viewing data in other things, you have to know where the data sits in each of these files. So we provide you with a data dictionary that will tell you if you want to see the cost centre, the employee code, the annual leave balance, where to find those fields. Okay, so we don't leave you digging around. Now mine is going to, I've set this one up to go to version 1.15, so that's where mine's going to. Okay, so all I need to do is now connect this spreadsheet to that payroll data, and that's the version 1.15. So all I'm going to do is bring out the employee, have a look at the employee master file, and I know that it is called somewhere here. There it is there. I'll just make these screens a little bit bigger. Alrighty. Okay, so what you'll see are all the fields that are on the employee master file. So if I go employee code, full name, and if I wanted normal rate, oh, there it is there. So I can just do that. Okay, so you just select the fields that you want, and I can return that to Excel, and there I have a list of employees. Now if I save that, okay, so you'll see there that I have a list of employees. Now, the difference between this spreadsheet and other spreadsheets that you might have, this has a live link back to the attaché payroll. So if I add a new employee and I change George's normal rate, you'll see what happens. So as I said, I'm reading this this software. So if I go here and I add a new person, man. Oh man, got my postcode on. Okay, and let's give him $5,000 a week. Because that's what you're worth, Matt. Do you know that? And if I change, oh, I should have changed. And if I change George's pay rate, don't worry about that message. And let's give him $300 a week. Okay, so when I go back to this spreadsheet now, when I go here and I refresh that data, you'll see that he's changed to $300 and there is Matt. So the idea is if you need to do custom reporting or you have management people who like to sit there and watch spreadsheets tick over every day, you can do that. And the idea is that you can put all your raw data onto here and then on sheet 2 you would format your Excel report. You can do VLOOKUPs, you can do whatever you wish to. So it's only, this is all based on your Excel skills.
So could you technically use that for your leave liability?
That's right. As soon as you set up this spreadsheet, all you have to do is to refresh the raw data and then it will pick up all those new figures. So there's a number of different ways you can use that Odbc to do it. You can use the Clearview, which I'll show you again this afternoon, some more custom reporting. But it's all about trying not to get people doing double entries. We don't want you taking our payroll reports, keying them into another system. We want all of our systems talking to one another because that's where your time comes. If you're doing double entry, that's when reconciliation becomes a nightmare. People transpose figures from $5,000 to $500 and things like that. So, yes, so we want systems to be talking to one another. Alrighty, I think it's lunchtime. So for everybody in the room, we have lunch provided downstairs. For those poor people out there watching us live, you'll have to cater for yourselves, I'm sorry. So I thank you all very much. For those of you who are coming back, after lunch at 5 to 2, we will all be coming back into this room and we will be having the gentleman from Opmetrics to talk to you about CRM systems and sales solutions and everything. So we would all appreciate everyone to be back in this room at 5 to 2. And of course, for the people online as well, the sessions will start at 5 to 2 as well. So I hope you all enjoy your lunch.